Writers, hello, this is Carter, and welcome to this episode of Making It Up, the conversational podcast where two writers just sit down and shoot the shit about whatever for about 45 minutes. It's not complicated. Before I get to today's guest, I have to tell you, we have a brand new website up at Unbound Writer. That's my writing coaching company. So at Unbound Writer, I do one-on-one manuscript coaching, and that's where I do most of my work, either manuscript coaching or just one-on-one sessions where I just talk to other writers about struggles that they're having with writing. We also have some self-guided online courses on the website, and we do also offer seminars and retreats. And I love how the new website looks. We just got it totally reinvented. So go ahead and check that out at unboundwriter.com. And it's worth mentioning that if you're looking for one-on-one book coaching, you can just click a button there and schedule a complimentary call with me where we can just chat for about 20 minutes or so and just figure out what you're struggling with, what you're looking for, and see if we are a good fit. All right, so today I had on the show Michael Kardos. So Michael is the author of the novels Fun City Heist, which is his latest and just came out. Also Bluff, Before He Finds Her, and The 3-Day Affair. He's also a short fiction writer and has won awards for that as well. It's fascinating talking to Michael. Michael is a writer's writer. Michael has been, he was in a band, he was a professional drummer, and he had this, I don't know if it's an epiphany. I think he had a slow evolution of thought around, this is a lot of work, and what is the payoff being a musician? And not only that, but it's also so dependent on the group, right? On other people also making decisions, whereas pursuing a career in writing is, yes, you are still at some point a team player, but it is a solo effort and it is your vision. And so he decided to go down that route, got his MFA from Ohio State, got his PhD, and he does, he works in academia as well as writing both short fiction and his novels. It was a fascinating conversation. He's a really interesting guy. I feel like I learned from him. And he also has a book out about how to write fiction. So it was interesting to kind of hear his advice as a teacher of writing and how long it takes to really understand whether you're doing it right or not. We talked about outlining versus pantsing, all those good things. And at the end, we made up a fairly bizarre story involving a large estate and a bloody python. And just wanted to reiterate his most recent book is Fun City Heist. So make sure to check that out. This is my conversation with Michael Kardos. So I think we got connected through Julia, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
hmm
she's great.
Yes,
She's
she
great.
is.
She used to work with K Publicity, who I use,
Mhm.
and then she went off and did her. How did you find her?
I think Julia was the first. I think one of my books, Before He Finds Her, was the first book that she worked on when she was with Kay. So
Oh, okay. So you used to be with Kay.
yeah. So she and I go back a ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, she's fantastic.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I was looking through your bio and everything, and just I'm always interested in kind of connecting the dots of like, oh, we have this in common, we have that in common.
Yeah.
You went to Ohio State for your MFA, right? And
Mhm.
my daughter's there in law school right now.
Oh,
So
right now? Oh,
slight,
yeah.
yeah, she's just finishing her first year, or second semester, first year.
Does she like
Uh,
it? I mean, I don't know if anyone loves their first year of law school, but
Yeah, she's doing well. The funny thing is she edits these, so she'll hear us talking about her. She really does enjoy it. She just landed a job for the summer, which is, I think, a big relief. Um, and then you're with Severn House, who I was with for my second book,
oh, okay.
way
Fantastic.
back when. That was it was, so this was whenever it was, 2005, 2006,
Mhm.
something like that. And my first publisher was very, 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 very small, went out of business. Severn House took my second book. And then Severn House taught me the lesson that all writers should know is that writing is a business. because they were great people. And then I gave them and the book did okay. It did whatever, very small
Mhm.
authors do with
Mhm.
kind of their second books. But I think it probably broke even, but that doesn't say
Mhm.
much because the advance wasn't very much.
Mhm.
Um, and then I gave them my third book and they really liked it. And then they just said, but your book didn't sell enough for us. So we have to turn this down. And I'm like, oh, this is a business. I mean, that sounds super naive and stupid, but it was kind of eye-opening for me. I'm like, but you liked it.
I know it's a strange, well, it's such a weird thing, and it is a business, but it's a bizarre business all the time.
Yeah.
And I think trying to think, I think a lot of writers, including myself, like the first things that I published were all from literary journals, right?
Yeah.
And literary journals are not businesses. Literary journals are none of them pretend to break even. And so what that means is they can take whatever they like. If they like it, they take it.
Right.
No one's working at a literary journal thinking, I don't know, commercially how this is going to do. Like, so I do think that there's some conditioning that goes on probably for a lot of us where like it's a nice pure training, and then you're like, oh, wait a minute, that's not how the whole publishing world works. That's just how these
Yeah. And
this
I mean,
one little part.
I guess it depends on what you're writing because if you start as kind of a short fiction writer, literary journals are certainly not only a good option, but a great aspiration, right? That would to be published in a literary journal is fantastic. If you slant more genre, you're looking for anthologies, you're looking for some of the other online magazines that maybe do pay a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, but I just never got into. I was never. I've written short fiction. I've written a decent
Yeah.
amount of it, but I always found it really difficult. I'm like,
Hmm.
I can't, I can't tell this story. And,
Uh,
you know,
yeah, I have so many aborted stories in my hard drive,
yeah.
going back so long. But
But do you ever think like you're working on a short story and you're like, this really needs to be a novel? And then all of a sudden you're in trouble.
yeah, I feel like I usually know. One of my novels sprung from a short story, which like never happens, and that made me really happy.
Yeah.
But usually I have a sense of just the scope of it.
Yeah. I think where if I'm ever writing a short story, I'm always thinking of like I think of a character and I think of just a snapshot in their life,
Mhm.
like a moment. And it might be a moment where they're just
Yeah.
sitting on the couch and it becomes very internal, probably highly boring. Um, but I can always envision like exploring that character more. Like it would be what's this
Mhm.
guy's deal?
Mhm.
And because I don't outline, that's how not my novels begin. It's kind of just
Yeah.
with this
Yeah.
concept of a person sitting on their couch thinking something and like,
Yeah.
what if this happens?
So you don't outline at all.
No, I've tried, I've come to the conclusion that you just have to honor how your brain works and everyone's
Totally.
brain works differently. And inevitably, even if I go and say, like, I'm 4 chapters in and I'm going to outline the next 3 or 4 chapters or the next couple
Mhm.
beats, um, inevitably, I think of something more interesting
Mhm.
because that my brain just kind of reveals it to
Right.
me.
And so do you usually write start to finish?
Yes, I have to
It's so
because,
guys, it's so funny. It's like the most basic question that everyone's always asked, right? Do you outline or not?
yeah,
But it's still an interesting question to me because everyone has their own answer.
it's
Like,
totally. And, I know somebody who's like, I just go through and start to finish, I just write the dialogue. And I'm like, wait,
oh, and then
what?
he turned it.
But then I'm like, oh, that kind of makes perfect sense because that's like writing a script, right? A
Hmm.
screenplay.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and then he just fills in all the atmosphere in between.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's fascinating. And but what always blows me away, and again to your point, it's such a basic question. The people who outline who just, it's not like they do it instantly. They take
Yeah.
time with it, but they just have this fully fleshed 10 to 20,000 word
Hmm.
outline. And I'm like, God, that's a relief. Like, hey, then you could just write it. That's amazing.
But
But
wouldn't part of you think that like if you've written a really compelling 10 or 20,000 word outline, wouldn't you, I feel like part of me would be like, I don't need to write the book now because here, just read this. You know
right,
what I mean? I
right,
feel like
right. Make
I don't
this
know if
into
the
a
energy
movie.
I feel like the energy wouldn't be there for me if I had that much outlined ahead of time. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being. I don't know.
Yeah,
So,
I think again, it's everyone's like when you're
yeah.
writing and there's a twist. Because I'm never thinking like, oh, I have to have a twist at X part of the manuscript. And if I don't have a twist, I don't have a twist.
Hmm.
I don't want to force one. But when it comes, when all of a sudden your brain just goes, what if this happens?
Yeah.
And you're just like, and you feel it viscerally.
And then you know it's the right decision,
You know,
right?
it's the right
It's
decision.
not
And
a
I'm like,
decision.
and I
Yeah.
could never, I don't think I could ever have outlined that, you
Yeah.
know. So what is your kind of process when you're, because I know you write short and long fiction, but when
Yeah.
you're working on novels, for
On the
example.
long stuff, it's kind of in the middle. Like I think I kind of have like a little bit of a scaffold. Like here are the 3 or 4 or 5 big things. So maybe I can tell the whole thing in like a page. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, but although so I don't have any details fleshed out. I will say though that almost every time I'm totally wrong. So when actually, when I'm working on it, that sort of epiphany of like, oh wait, this twist or this giant thing that's so clearly the right move is never in that mini quasi outline thing anyway.
Yeah.
So.
Right. And that
But
just comes from experience of just knowing, and not just experience writing, but experience reading, consuming stories, however you consume
yeah,
stories, of just feeling like, of course, this has to happen. I couldn't
right.
see that initially, but it all leads to this moment
Yeah,
because this is the MacGuffin of everything.
and I don't think it ever happens when I'm working either. It's always going to be like when I'm taking a walk or like doing dishes, or that's when the big
Isn't
things
that weird too? You
happen.
think like, had I not been doing dishes at that moment,
Yeah.
and it's not like you're always right too. Sometimes you're just like you have a
Hmm.
great idea and you start teasing it out, and you're like, this feels like I'm forcing it, or
Yeah.
whatever it is, or it feels like a trope.
Hmm.
But most of the time, if I again, if I feel it on the skin, same thing if with an idea for a book, if I have
Hmm.
a loose idea and I feel it in a tactile way, I'm like, that might be something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yes.
how did you I mean, you obviously, I know musical background, you have a very creative background. You were a professional drummer. So has your brain always been kind of just spinning?
Yeah. Spinning off. Yeah, I think I was always working on creative things, and I always liked this is kind of sound weird. I always liked finishing things, like if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So
no,
I
your
always,
brain needs completion in a way.
yeah, and so I always like trying to finish things, and I played music throughout my 20s. I'd always read and always read a lot. My mom was an English teacher, and we just had a
Okay.
lot of books around and all of that. And so it's not like it was this thing out of left field. But what I noticed when I was in my kind of late 20s and noticed all the musicians who are like older than me, it's hard. It's so hard to do and so hard to maintain and
Yeah.
as a life. And what I noticed was that um, I started writing stories and just doing things. I was like, oh wait, when I write, I don't need other guys, and I don't need a sound man, and I don't need a stage, and I don't need I don't need gear. And it was so
Right.
nice to be able to make something without
Right.
all the crap associated with it, you know?
Yeah,
So,
it's your own vision.
mhm. So that
Yeah.
was really, really appealing. And so I just,
But it's also very scary because it's your own vision.
yeah, well,
And
that's
you're
true.
like, yeah, you go, but you obviously took it very seriously to the extent that you got your MFA.
Yeah,
That's a commitment.
it was, but also it was a commitment, but it was also a fun commitment because like it was a way to go back to school. It was a way to get out of New Jersey for a while and just like, you know what I mean? And just kind of
Yeah,
just try something really different. And so I ended up going to Ohio State. They offered me a teaching assistantship. So I went there.
that's
And it was
great.
good. Within like a week, I was like, oh, this is such a good call because really for the first, I didn't know a lot of writers
Yeah,
or any writers. And really, for the first time, I was around other people who were interested in the same kinds of things and thinking about the same kinds of things and validating the same kinds of time wasting. And you know what I mean? It was
yeah.
really so it was a very fun thing to
So
do. And
how do you get into that though? Because forgive my ignorance, I
yeah,
know very little about applying to an MFA program. I assume you submit samples, and not only are they accepting you, they're also, letting you work there as teaching.
hmm
Was this not kind of very before you really started doing a lot of writing?
Yeah, I had submitted, you had to submit like a couple of short stories for a writing sample, and
Okay.
I sent in a couple of those that I had written. You had to have you had to have letters of recommendation. And I had been out of school a long time and I had been a music major, so I didn't really have um professor recommenders, which is the typical thing. So one of my letters was the lead singer of my band.
Yeah. Was he the lyricist also?
One of them. They were just wacky letters, I'm sure, but
Yeah.
yeah, it worked out, and so yeah, so I did that, and I thought I would do that for 3 years and go back to Jersey and get a job or whatever, but I ended up really liking it, and just yeah, it just kind of worked. I ended up getting a PhD for the same reason, which is like I like being in grad school. I didn't
Yeah.
feel cooked yet, you know what I mean? Like I was learning
Yeah.
so much stuff.
Yeah.
And so I ended up going on, and that's when they started having like PhDs with a creative dissertation. So you're doing
Yeah.
all the English literature stuff, but your big book you're writing was essentially a first book.
Yeah.
So it was like it was great, and it didn't hurt that I met my wife there. So we went there together for our
Well, that's
PhDs.
great. Where it was, so was that also in Ohio, the
That was at
PhD?
Missouri, University of Missouri.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but was, yeah, and then it's funny because I feel like the people who that continuous schooling is just this intellectual curiosity. It's like you said, like I've got more to learn. Like, and of course,
Hmm.
there's an endless amount to learn for anything. But you finish, and then one of the, from what I can tell, one of the first things that you produced was a book about writing. Is that that was an early
Yes,
on book, right?
it was. So my first book was a collection of stories, which is basically a revised version of my dissertation.
Yeah,
And then around the same time, I had this book of about writing. And the reason that happened was because when I started really trying to get more serious about my writing, I didn't know writers, but I took out like every craft book I could find. I'm sure you've seen them too.
yeah,
Just
for sure.
just a library's full of them. And I just read and read and read and read. And I kept thinking like, all right, if I were to write one of these, what would I put in it? Which points seem to really resonate with me across the 50 of them I'd read, and
Yeah,
and so I never intended to write that. But an editor from the publishing company contacted me to basically to review books.
yeah.
And I said, okay, so we met for lunch. And then by the end of it, she's like, well, we don't really have a fiction writing book of our own. Would you be interested? And so we sketched out some chapter headings on a napkin, and it just kind of worked. Like one of my sort of themes is I'm a really bad planner. But I just kind of go with the way the current is going,
Yeah.
and it so that kind of it was a great thing though, in that it sort of made me try to really think through what works for me in terms of stories and like how, just a lot of so many craft books are like a chapter on scene, a chapter on setting. I was like, who
Yeah.
writes that way? Nobody does
Yeah.
that.
No, I
Nobody's
hate that.
Right. So mine was more like, all right, a chapter on beginnings, because everybody has to start somewhere. Like a chapter on
Right.
endings,
Right.
a chapter on scene writing, the things that we actually do. So,
I mean, it's so, I started coaching a few years ago and I love doing it, but I really fought against it in my own head for a little while because because I come from a background of zero writing education,
mhm.
creative education, and I kind of just started writing and it was just like this weird epiphany, but literally not knowing what I was doing. And I read a couple craft books, but I've always been a big believer, just going back to what we were just saying about outlining versus pantsing, that you just have to trust your own instincts. And that doesn't mean you can't get better. That doesn't mean you can't learn and feel things that resonate with you. But when I started thinking about craft books, I always felt like it was always, with the exception of maybe Stephen King's On Writing, it was always like, this is how you do it. And I just am such a firm disbeliever of that,
Oh, as
that,
soon as you see this is what you shouldn't do, it's what you want to do. Like, here's the next story
right,
I'm going to write is the one that says I can't do. Of course, right? That's why we're doing it in the first
totally.
place.
Or you see people, going back to our analogy, who are not outliners, killing themselves over an outline when realizing like they're not listening to the and I think what becomes really difficult with this is I think most writers, including myself, are just have such a lack of self-confidence around their writing that the idea of trusting your instincts is exceptionally hard to do. And has to be reinforced by the experience, a positive experience of doing that.
Mhm.
And I mean, for me, that took hundreds of thousands of words before I could feel comfortable trusting myself of like, no, I don't know what I'm doing, but it's worked out for me before. And as
Yeah,
long as you're dedicated to getting better, but it's hard.
it is hard, and I feel like it's really easy it's really easy to finish something and then immediately have no idea how you did it and no idea how to do the next thing.
That's a great point because that happens to me every time. Especially if I look back and I never reread my books except for when I'm editing them. But if you have a moment where you remember a part of a book and you're like, yeah, that's pretty good. I don't remember writing that. And how did I write this whole book? And how do I keep writing? It's weird, isn't it? I wonder
It's
what that is.
it's incredibly weird, and it's weird every time. And I want to write down, and I never do this, but I always there's moments I always want to write down like today's date and be like, this is impossible and it's terrible and it will never go anywhere. So that if it does, I can look back on it and be like, all right, that was my state then. But
Right. Right. Because if I had to encapsulate a memory of a book, so say a book takes me anywhere between 9 and 12 months, right?
Mhm.
For me, at least. I would, if I look back on it, I could probably easily say 75 to 85% of that time I felt uneasy about what I was writing. Like I just felt like, just like you said, like,
Yes,
yeah, it's got some great parts in
yeah,
it that are exciting, but like, is it cohesive? Does
no,
it make sense? Does anyone give a shit about this?
uneasy is
Like,
a great word because it's not self-loathing. It's something more gentle than that, but it's just
yeah,
sort of like slightly like it's unease. And
it
then you're
is. Because when you read a book that really connects with you by another writer, it's a very definitive feeling. And I never have that about reading my own stuff. I never feel like this is great. And it's because you're so close to it and because you've rehashed
Mhm.
stuff and you've worked through it on a skeletal level for so long that you just feel like I just have no perspective. I'm like, we'll see what the agent says. And I might have hunches, but I won't ever have like, oh, they're going to love this or they're going to hate this.
Yeah, and I think what happens too, by the time you're done with it, and this kind of reminds me too of recording music, all you see or hear is like the duct tape and the nails and like it's hard to step back and see it as a work when you're aware
Yeah.
of all the decisions. After a while, all the decisions you make fade away. You forget what they even were, and it starts to seem like a more coherent thing. But
Yeah, and it's funny, and I've said this before, like sometimes you're asked to go do a reading, and I haven't looked at the book in forever, and I've never read it since it's been published, and I find a 5 minute piece, or probably what's a 10 minute piece that I edit down by
right.
hand just to 5 minutes. I'm like, why didn't I just write it like this? It's so much tighter and it's so much better. Or then you find other scenes, you're like, wow, this is a really introspective, interesting,
Mhm.
emotional passage. And I'm kind of proud of myself. And there's other scenes you're like, oh, this feels very genre or
Mhm.
whatever it is. So you and I feel like looking at your history too, I don't know. I'm guessing here. It feels like you're someone who just has a lot of creativity that's just coming out all the time and you're not necessarily like I'm going to write this and now I want to write this and this interests me and now this interests me. Looking at your catalog, you've written different stuff. And is that to and which is great. um but it can also be like, I, how do you balance that with, okay, I'm going to have my lane here and this is
Mhm.
my career path.
Yeah, I have absolutely no sense of balance at all. That's how.
Maybe that's a better way of
Um,
putting it.
and no, I don't. I truly don't have a sense of balance. And my fiction often tends to lie between genres and is unshelvable. But I think what it is too is that um, I think I'm as I'm a good enough writer to write the thing I'm really, really interested in writing, but I'm not good enough to do anything but that. So the thing that I'm really interested in is the thing that I have to do, which, is a short story. less now that I'm working more on novels, but when I'm interested, if the novel idea really connects, then I do it. But I have a couple novels that haven't worked. I've written the whole novel and it just doesn't quite work, which
What
is
do you do
tough.
in that case? Like you actually still
I weep. Um, no, and it's tough. Those are tough. I've got a couple of those, and it's like there are some really good ideas in there, and some really good scenes, and
but who's the
probably
judge of it not working? Is it just you or you workshopped it or you gave it to somebody?
kind of all of the above.
Yeah.
Like there's just not the excitement about it. You know what it is?
Okay.
If somebody reads it and they're not crazy about it, and I'm like, "You're stupid," then I know I like it. If they
Right.
if they're not crazy about it, and they're like, and I'm like, "Oh, I think you're totally
When they
right."
confirm your instincts that you weren't willing to acknowledge.
Yeah, and it's that's and I like to think I'll revise it at some point, or at least steal enough stuff from it that it was worth doing. And I've done that before. Like I've gotten a couple scenes out of some things that I aborted. But I think what it is though, I think I was in retrospect aware that thing that you talked about, that like visceral
Hmm.
feeling wasn't quite high enough,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And you that's where the self-doubt comes in because you're like, well, maybe I'm just not a good judge of that.
Hmm.
And if that's the case, then I'm kind of fucked because like it's my job to like either have the
Yeah,
high concept and
yeah.
execute it or know what's working and what's not working. And I think the truth is it's just an incredibly hard thing. It doesn't matter how many books you write, you're never sitting there thinking like this is the one that's going to be the
Hmm.
breakup because of X, Y, and Z. And I'm surprised all the time. Like one of my favorite books that I wrote would did very middling and my last book was my breakout and I'm like I loved the book but I didn't have a sense of like this is going to connect with readers. I have no
Hmm.
idea and it's but that's also kind of part of the excitement of it, right? It's
Hmm.
like the best can always be yet to come, and I think that as long as you're committed to the craft and committed to an ever long journey of learning and you're not ever saying I'm perfect the way I'm doing it. Man, you could be 80 years old and all of a sudden you have this monster. It just is. I love that.
I do too, and I feel like that is one pretty significant difference between writing and music, right? Like
Sure.
a life in music, it doesn't work that way, right? And so, I feel like with writing, one thing that was so nice about it, you do not have to hit your peak at age 26.
Right.
In
Right.
fact, you're not going to hit your peak at 26.
Right. Right. No, and as a writer, you actually could, because what's so fascinating to me also is watching, because I also work with debut authors
Hmm.
through international thriller writers, and thriller publishing companies love a shiny debut.
Hmm.
Um, and sometimes that debut just takes off. And I've interviewed a lot of them, and a lot of times that second book is like a fraction
Hmm.
of the popularity. And they do have this feeling of, did I just peak with
Yeah.
my first book when I still don't even know what I'm doing? And that's a very scary thing.
Do you think that's do you think that's often a publishing world thing, in terms of it's not the book itself, but it's that you can't promote a second book as a debut author?
It's a good question. I mean, I see debuts varying in popularity, right? So, and it's hard to gauge, but you
Hmm.
you have some sense of sale. You can just look at reviews, see
Right.
how many reviews that do they have, and that gives you a sense a little bit. Unless it's an
Hmm.
Amazon book, then it's just like 20,000 reviews no matter what. Um, I think the publishers, depending on what advance they're paying, if they really connect with something, they'll pay a hefty advance to a debut. And I don't think that happens a whole lot unless they're really confident it's going to do well. And
Hmm.
then yes, when they go to promote the second one, I think there's an expectation of, yeah, we don't expect this to do as well. But I think there's a minimum expectation, which is still
Hmm.
probably far beyond what a
Yeah.
mid-lister is selling on a regular basis.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of times it doesn't even hit that level. And
Hmm.
then it's just like, well, why? What is it? And yeah, as somebody who teaches and has written a book on writing, you know as well as anyone, like shit changes all the time and you can't pinpoint any of it.
Hmm.
I don't know if you
Yeah.
would agree with that.
I 100% agree with that, because there's I mean, there's so many moving factors, right?
Right.
Everything from the book itself to the zeitgeist it happens to be publishing, like the time and is happening when it's published and what's going on in the news, and if the sort of publishing machine is behind it or not behind it, and if somebody at their publishing company quit or a month before the book came out. There's so many things, right? They're
Right.
moving parts and
Right. Totally. You're writing and you're just, throwing a piece of paper into a moving river. And by the time it gets published, it's miles and miles and miles and miles down.
yeah,
And you don't know if anyone's interested anymore. It's really like difficult thing, which I think that the benefit of that, it does give the writer permission to just let go and be like, I can't
absolutely.
control anything.
Yeah.
What I can control is my enjoyment of the act of writing and storytelling. And so let me just do that to the best of my ability, be aware of the market, but not writing to the market.
hmm
And and if it doesn't work, go on to the next one. What I see a lot with students is this was so hard. I wrote this whole thing and nothing happened. So I'm a failure. And I'm like, no, you're just learning, know,
Yeah, you're looking at this amount of time instead of that amount of time.
right,
Yeah.
right. I look at my first three books that did not sell. They were agented but
hmm
did not sell. I'm like,
hmm
that's my college. That was where I learned to write
Totally.
books.
That was your MFA, right? That
Yeah,
was, yeah.
total. And it continues, right? Every book, I'm like, what are my
Yeah.
strengths and weaknesses?
I
What,
had,
you know?
my first year in grad school, there was a professor there who was leaving. Okay. And I could say his name. It's fine. He's a great guy, Bill Rohrbach. And I think my first year was his last year. And before he left, he had never read any of my stuff, right? So I was like, oh, I want to give him a story to read and critique in some way. So I gave him, he's like, yeah, give me a story. So I gave him a story on a Friday. And the next week, he hands it back. And he says, I'm waiting for him to say something. He goes, the first million words of practice anyway.
Wow.
So, which immediately I told my friend, and the two of us go home. We start looking, open our computers, being like, how many words you at? How many, how close are you? And he'd been doing it longer. So he's like, I think I'm up to 300,000. I'm like, oh no, I'm only at 80,000, but it was hilarious. But it's true though,
Yeah. I don't know if I agree with the number million because
well,
I've
maybe
heard
a
that
million's
many
high,
times.
but it sure made me laugh. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, it's a
Yep. Yep.
lifelong commitment to learning. And I'm kind of interested. So the book that you were with Kay, was that Before He Finds Her?
Yes, that was the first one. Yeah. Huh.
So and that is and that was, correct me if I'm wrong. Was that Mysterious Press? Was that Otto?
hmm Yeah,
Yeah.
my first three novels were all Mysterious Press. So the first
And they must
one,
have just been kind of ramping up because they
they
haven't been around.
were, yeah, they had been around for a long time, but that was their first incurrent when they had joined with Grove Atlantic. That was their first. They were pretty new with that, and then Kay was ramping up, and Julia's, that was her first book she took on. That was my second novel, but it was the first one I worked on with Julia.
Okay. Got it. Got it. Got it.
And then we worked again with Bluff, which was a couple of years later.
But if you look at Before He Finds Her, that is very right in the middle of classic thriller
Mhm.
title, cover, concept. Um, and and then you didn't kind of stay in that lane again, maybe because you said you don't have any sense of balance. But did you have a sense of writing a book like that, of like, yeah, it was all right, I enjoyed writing it, but what I really want to do next is this? Or
No, the first novel, which was the 3 Day Affair, I just wrote, and then my agent sent it out to some literary presses, some genre presses, just to see what some reaction would be. And so Otto Penzler ended up taking it,
yeah.
we had a really funny conversation. He's like, "So you're a crime writer now." So his editorial notes were, "Read through this book, keep that in mind, and just edit what you want to edit."
Huh.
And it wasn't very much, but that one was kind of thrillery, more thrillery. Before He Finds Her, has a mystery baked
Yeah.
into it, which I
Right.
hadn't really done before. But both of those ideas had been kicking around my head for like a decade. They
Huh.
weren't like new ideas. And then the same thing, then the one after that had really been kicking in my head for 10 years. So it's sort of like these really old composting ideas.
They were like, it was like an exorcism. You had to just get it out.
Yeah, yeah.
That's funny. And then Fun City Heist. your
is
your your
different.
your latest is, you know, just reading about it feels much more contemporary literary to me. Music adjacent, obviously.
Mhm.
Um, how would you classify that book?
I mean, to me, it's my Donald Westlake book.
Okay.
It's my
Oh, interesting.
Dortmunder. I read a lot of those novels during the pandemic,
Yeah.
and I had the basic idea in my head, and I had wanted to write a rock band book forever.
Yeah.
It, like I feel like that was just the idea of writing something that felt true to the experience of being in a band, but also this idea of a band of musicians being like the band of thieves because they know each other so well and they're used to
Yeah.
everything going wrong. And it just made sense. And I've been reading all these Westlake novels and the sort of comic heist kind of things.
Yeah.
And I needed something in pandemic days to it was good for me to be thinking about that kind of stuff. And so that's kind of how that took shape.
But I assume the voice, which I always think is impressive to me when I assume the voice is much different, right? Like you
Yeah.
said, it's much more comic, much more heisty. Obviously, it's in the title. Then maybe thriller mystery where, the personal stakes are always high. So the person, not a lot of humor going on necessarily.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And I struggled a lot, but I think by this book, not as much, but this idea of how do you have humor in a thrillery kind of book, which is sort of by definition the most stressful, typically awful days of someone's life. That was
Yeah.
hard, right? How do you do that? And Bluff had some humor in it,
Yeah.
but this one is more explicitly a comic novel.
Yeah.
And I think that happens because of the sort of underlying absurdity of the situation, the absurdity of these characters of what they're trying to do, but it's not making fun of them, you know what I mean? It's just that there's an absurdity to being in a band and it's like being it has all of the baked in difficulties of being a writer, but stupider somehow. Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like you're taking all your gear and to a club and you're only playing for the sound man is somehow worse
Right.
than just driving your
Right.
car to a bookstore and not having a lot of people show up. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Right.
this,
Right.
it's just
Right. Because you actually had to like physically carry a really heavy equipment to
you
do.
had to drive to Dubuque and
Right.
unload up 3 flights of fire steps, your drum set. You know what I mean? And then have no one show up. It's just funny, you
Right.
know?
It is funny. It is funny. Yeah. Yeah. And you can have a heist book that definitely has, because I think of something like, it's not related, obviously, but something like an Ocean's 11,
Mhm.
where it is very quippy and everyone's,
Yeah.
very funny in their own way, but it's also, a relatively serious situation, and it just works. I think with a thriller, I think it's funny because I'm constantly thinking of funny lines, and
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't put this in there. This is a great line, but it would pull the reader out, unless you're really leaning into gallows humor or
Right.
somebody who just has that dark sense of humor, but it can very easily become kind of noirish kind of
Hmm.
humor that
Hmm.
way. It just depends on what you're known for, but you do have to show restraint of like, oh, this would be a crazy good idea, but just
And you
not for
can't use
this
it.
book. So
Yeah.
yeah. So what are you working on now? What I know you've got a collection of short stories coming out.
Yeah, I have a collection of stories coming out imminently. And that kind of came about just because since my first book was a collection of stories, and that was like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's just a chance to put some together that I liked,
Yeah.
and the publisher who did the first one is doing this one. So that's kind of been kind of fun.
Yeah.
And then, I'm kind of running a horse race right now. I've got a few novel ideas and a bunch of pages written, and I keep shifting back and forth between the one I'm waiting to see. I think I know which one's going to go.
Huh.
And it's music adjacent, but
Okay.
it's very different. Um, and
I think
it's
it's hard to juggle stuff. I mean, I'm impressed for people who can
yeah,
do that.
I wouldn't say I'm juggling it. I would say I'm just kind of like
Vetting.
I'm vetting, right?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to see which one I'm gonna sit down and really work on. So
Okay. Well, that's
yeah,
exciting.
yeah.
I know I'm getting to the point where I'm like, I should probably start thinking of my next book. And I got
But it's
enough.
nice. It's nice to have something work that you're working on when the one comes out, right? To have the next one in pro because it's something to think about that's not the book that's coming
Totally.
out.
Yeah. My goal is a book a year. So I'm always hopefully a year ahead of when something comes out.
Yeah,
So by the time something comes out, I have the other one turned in. But it's hard.
but that's great. No, that's
It's
really good.
it's
Yeah.
exhausting. Well, Michael, we're going to wrap up before you do. We're going to do our own little storytelling. So I'm going to pick a book at random. We're going to choose a random page, a random sentence. I'm
Okay.
going to read that sentence,
Okay.
and that'll be the first sentence in a short story. So we'll just
So how do we?
alternate sentences.
Yeah, perfect.
Um, Give me a color of a book. I'll choose
Let's
something.
see. How about blue?
I grabbed this one. How to Solve Your Own Murder by
Okay.
Kristen Perrin. So give me a page between 1 and 358.
Let's see. 92.
Okay, I'm going to quickly scan 92 and see if it lends itself well. Well, it will. I forced we have to use page 92. It's all in italics, which is interesting.
Really? Okay.
All right.
So do we have to think in italics now?
Yeah, or parenthetically, whatever you want to do. Um, this is so strange to describe because less than an hour before, I hated this big creepy estate and swore never to come back here again.
Could you read it one more time?
Yes, I sure can. This is so strange to describe because less than an hour before, I hated this big creepy estate and swore never to come back here again.
This big creepy estate,
Estate.
D-A-T-E.
Yeah.
Oh, this big creepy estate, and
Yeah.
swore never to come back here again.
Yeah.
Okay. The electric fence might have had something to do with that.
But I knew it had been turned off because I was the one to disconnect the power myself.
That
I
also, oh, I'm sorry, I
Go
didn't mean to
ahead.
cut
No,
you
go
off.
ahead.
That also explains my burned thumbs.
I walked up to the front door, which measured at least 15 feet high and 7 feet wide, with a massive lion's head knocker, and decided to go straight for the doorknob.
I knocked once softly, then again softly, then a third time so loud I scared myself.
No one answered, and I had a sinking suspicion why that would be the case. And as I slowly let myself in and took my first few steps on the marble floor of the foyer, the smell confirmed those suspicions.
It was the smell that could have been made by the lion whose head was mounted outside. It could have been made by many mammals of large size, but the only animal I saw slithering along the ground was a relatively small python.
And I knew at once the python was wounded, not because of how it moved, but because of the trail of blood it left in its wake. And then I realized maybe that's not the python's own blood. I think we call it there. You
I
wanted
think that's
weird, you
good.
got weird.
All right. The
Who
python did it.
who knows what is happening in that house? Well, Michael, what a pleasure to meet you, to talk to you. Do you do conferences? Are you out and about? Will I see you at somewhere?
Yeah, I'm in and about these days mostly. I'm gonna be, you know, because I'm still kind of quasi in academia, sorta. I go to this AWP conference, the Association
Okay.
of Writers program. So I'll be doing that in Baltimore in early March, and then I'll be around. I live in Delaware, so I'll be here,
Okay.
hoping the spring comes soon and just trying to bang out some pages.
I hear you, man. I hear you. Well, great talking to you. Enjoy the rest of your week and thanks again.
Oh, thank you. It's been a real
Take
pleasure.
care.
Okay.
Bye. All right, that is it. That's my conversation with Michael Kardos. I love that one. He was I always get energized by these conversations, and I love, and maybe it sounds lazy, but I love not preparing questions. Um, because when I'm talking to somebody, that's how my brain works. Maybe it's like writing, like my brain works, it gives me ideas when I'm writing it while I'm actually writing. I can't outline. When I'm talking to somebody and in conversation with them, that's when I get the questions because I'm feeding off of their energy. But he was fascinating to talk to. So I really enjoyed that one. You can learn all about Michael and his latest book, Fun City Heist, at his website, which is michaelkardos.com. And you can pop on over to carterwilson.com to learn more about me and my writing. And if you're interested in any kind of writing coaching, head on over to our brand new website at unboundwriter.com and check that out. All right, friends, writers, that is it. That is it for this episode of Making It Up. I always appreciate you watching and or listening to these. Tell a friend, spread the word. Trying to get more views as always. That would be fantastic. Another episode out just next week. In the meantime, take care.